Welcome to another episode of The Exchange.
On today's show, we will discuss the challenges that arise in parenting, but particularly so after a separation.
It's easy for parents to get caught up in their issues, but what's the best way to parent after a separation?
Almost half of all marriages in Australia end in divorce. It's a very sad and real statistic. But what is sadder is when there are children involved. In the best interests of the child, when a mother and father separate, what is the best form of parenting after a separation?
Joining us is Emeritus Professor Thea Brown, who was an academic at Monash University in the Department of Social Work. Thea's research has focused on children and parental separation and has examined the well-being of children after their parents have separated. It's great to have you on the show, Thea.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Joining us also is Lifeworks and Couples and Family Relationship Counsellor Wendy Driscoll. Wendy develops many education programs. One in particular focuses on adapting to parenting after separation. Wendy can also share from her personal experience of what it's like to parent after a separation. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Delighted to be here. Great.
Now, I love that accent. There's a little bit of South African in there, I think.
I can't get away from it.
You can't, can
No.
you? Now, let's focus on our topic today. Now, parenting, of course, is difficult in any shape or form, but what are the difficult issues to tackle for parents when they separate?
What I've noticed is the most difficult thing is that loss of power. From a woman's point of view, we've been looking after our children and caring and nurturing them, and then suddenly they go away to dad's. And from a dad's point of view, he's lost his castle in essence. His home has been broken up, and very often he doesn't have as much time with his children as before. So both are struggling with the same thing, but from a different angle.
And Thea, what have you found in your research in this area?
I think I'd agree with Wendy, but I would add that in addition to this loss of power and the loss that you have lost control and the sense before that you had sole control, although you didn't, but you had informally a lot of control, is the acrimony that goes with the separation that then gets added into the fact that you've got to share your child's welfare and decisions about your children with that partner that you really have come to regard very poorly. And I think one of the major problems at this point is that the parents get totally obsessed with each other and they don't think very much about the children and what the impact of all of this is having on the children.
So how important is it then to remain amicable in a separation?
I think it's paramount. I think if you can't, it makes it very difficult, but I think you have to admit that it's very hard to stay amicable. Yeah. It's very easy to remember the bad and very hard to focus on the future.
So, Wendy, from your perspective, what's the best thing for parents to remember when the acrimony is, the emotions are running high?
I just think take a time out. Self-care is important, because if you're not able to calm down yourself, your children will pick it up. And this is a key issue.
Well, you mentioned, Thea, about being amicable. Well, if it is just not amicable and it is really a difficult situation, how do you navigate through that? Is that when you bring in another professional, or what would your advice be there?
Yes, my advice would be to get some help. There are a lot of programs to try and get people sharing constructively in the decision-making and the arrangements for their children's future. Because what we do know from children is that they feel it just as strongly as the parents, and it's very easy for them to feel completely left out, to feel not understood, and to start to run into difficulties, which then compound the parents' own difficulties. So you've got two parents at war with each other who are separated, who can't get on, who can't agree, and then you've got children who are, I suppose, if they're all running out of control in some way or other, but if they're younger, being very unhappy.
The kids would feel like they were the meat in the sandwich here, wouldn't they?
Yes, they feel very torn. It's very easy for them to be torn. And that's why we encourage, perhaps instead of the word amicable, if I might say, more of a business-like arrangement. People find, especially if they're very fraught and tense and anxious and in lots of conflict, they find the idea of a business relationship a little bit more tolerable. And
okay. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? What would a business arrangement look like? So on different things like what? Discipline, boundaries, education?
It would be in terms of communication mainly. For example, if you can think of your child here, as maybe this is Harry, and if we're trying to communicate around Harry, we might not like communicating with each other. However, we could send an email, it's the school function tonight, or next week, I'm going on Thursday, would you like tickets for Friday? And the communication is around the child, so the child is safe, but we don't have to have intimate conversation. It can be done through email, it can be done through SMS, it can be done quietly. And
is there any evidence-based research that would say that if we do stick to these guidelines, deal with it in a adult and professional almost way, that the recovery for the children will be that they will go on progressively to get over this and to perform normally at school and to adjust? Or is there always a limp with that child?
The research wouldn't be as clear-cut as you would like it to be, but what it does show is that parents who continue the conflict, who don't talk about Harry, but who have arguments about Harry and who go to Harry's football match and come to blows at Harry's football match and involve other people, those children become very damaged and they don't recover. They just remain in a very poor state. And that's why the notion of business-like becomes very important, because it stops inflicting further damage on the child. There's the damage that's done at the point of separation and immediately afterwards, but there's the likelihood of ongoing damage unless the parents can pull it together and say, look, I've got to think about Harry and I've got to put Harry first.
There's a saying about it takes a village to raise a child. Wendy, what do we do when that village is not a village that you actually want? So one partner starts to involve other people in the upbringing of your child. What are some of the practical things we can do there? Because that's the loss of control issue that you mentioned first.
I think the most important thing is to seek help, to speak to a counsellor. If you find that your child is going to the other parent, and they have additional members or they re-partner, if the child has got a safe place where they can go and they can talk to somebody and they can learn how to deal with it, it's very helpful. And the parent who has the child most of the time can also get help. And it's how you unpack it and how you listen to them and how you, age appropriate of course, can get them to talk to their own parent when they go to the other side and find out how best they can cope with the difficulties.
I'm just like to unpack the business arrangement that you're saying. Is it ever done where two people who were formerly together, now they're separated, do they ever sit down and actually work out and put in writing what they both agree on the essentials for Harry?
Yes, under the federal legislation, under the family law legislation, came the notion of a parenting plan, and that is highly promoted by the federal government, and it is a written plan of what will be done, what are the agreements, what are the arrangements, and there's a list of topic areas to be covered, and if parents can't come to this point themselves, then they're asked to go to a family relationship centre where they will get help to produce a parenting plan.
That's really good.
Sometimes with quite a lot of conflict, it takes quite a lot of help for some people, but some people are in considerable agreement pretty much early on and can complete that fairly quickly. But it is a way of putting down, as you say, in writing, and it's something people can refer back to. It's a guideline.
This is what we agreed to. We're going to stick to this.
We'll stick to this, yes.
And that's got to be better, surely, than taking the whole thing to court and paying up, serious amounts of money to lawyers to sort things out.
I think it's by far to be preferred, and it is very serious amounts of money that you may have to pay. And the notion that some parents have, I will go to court, I will have my day, I will win. Nobody wins. The decision is just, whatever it is, it's not likely to please the person who went to court, and it's certainly not going to please the other person, because you never really can see your own situation objectively. And the court's going to try and place the child first, and whatever that decision is, it's very unlikely to suit everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Just before we go to the break, what about family support? So, obviously, you know, some people don't have family around, but if you've got family, how can family best support through these times?
They can be a wonderful support, especially if they have a neutral stance, because they can be the go-to person for the children. The children will always feel safe, they have boundaries, they're loved unconditionally, and if they have any issues, they can usually talk to their grandparents. Mind you, I want to add that's if they are neutral.
Yes,
Yes.
sure.
And that can be a really safe place for them. So even if their parents are anxious and dealing with difficult issues, if their grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins are still around and life is as normal as possible, then it can really help keep the balance.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We're going to take a break. We're really appreciating the discussion with Thea and Wendy and Harry as well, although we understand Harry is a bit of a mug. We'll be back in just a moment with Street Talk and more. Stay right here.
What do you think a child needs from their parents post a separation?
Post-separation, I think that they need their parents to be consistent in what they're doing in their lives, some order and love, reassurance.
We're really contact with both of the parents, so they need to still know that the parents still care about them and that it wasn't necessarily like the kid's fault, as a lot of kids do think when their parents separate.
Look, I think a child always needs a supportive environment. I mean, divorce rate's pretty high in general, but I mean, it's not something that I've had to go through growing up. My parents are still together.
I guess just love and care from both parents.
Mostly a child definitely needs just a cooperative environment to be a part of. So as long as their parents or his or her parents are still sort of getting along and making sure they're doing the right thing by the child.
A lot of comfort and a lot of yeah, they just need to know that everything's going to be good, all right, and that they're going to be have a lot of support from both sides.
Look, probably just the love and support of each parent, and also just open communication so they know what's going on and that you know, they still feel supported with both of their parents not living together.
I think they need attention. I think that sometimes parents can get caught up in themselves, and I think the child can sometimes be a bit forgotten.
And do you think that's hard to achieve?
I think it is, because you know, if they've separated, they don't really want to see each other.
I would say it's very difficult. Haven't gone through it, but plenty of my friends have parents who are separated, and you know, you've been in the mix as a kid where you've sort of been in the middle of a shouting match. It's not, you know, the greatest environment.
It can be, but I guess it depends on the parents themselves and what caused them to split.
Definitely not, but given the circumstances, it's a necessity. It has to be achieved.
It can be. I think there's a lot of help out there, and I think if you can talk to family and friends, I think that will help out a lot. Yeah.
Look, I think it is, as long as I think it's really important that the parents maintain a good relationship with each other so that they can be there for their children, and just remain amicable. So, yeah, the child still feels the love from both parents.
Definitely, they shouldn't be forgotten.
Welcome back. We're discussing parenting after a separation with Professor Thea Brown and Lifeworks Wendy Driscoll and our Street Talk reporter Sandra Cavallo. Welcome.
Hi Rob, hi Christy.
Hi, I was very impacted by some of the balanced approach of some of the young adults out there. What about you?
Yeah, totally, and I think they understand the ramifications that a separation brings lots of issues with it. But at the same time, when I asked the question about, you know, what does a child need, there were so many things that a child needs, particularly after a separation. And I wonder, you know, how easy is that to achieve? And most of them, of course, said, no, it's not. But one person in particular said it's a necessity. And I just wonder how, if parents have that in mind, do they see it as a necessity to try and keep the peace so the child can be supported?
The research that I've done and others have done suggests that the parents don't see it that way. But where they can be encouraged to see it that way, and there is quite a lot of success in programs at family relationship centres that focus on that, they do feel that they can go on and do that, and they do feel very changed by it. They really do feel quite moved by being given this tool for understanding their future. It might seem obvious to me or you, but it certainly isn't to them at the point in the first 12 months after separation.
And something I can add to that is that when we do have at Lifeworks people coming to the Parenting After Separation program, and after being involved in a couple of weeks where we show them what children actually say and think, they're mind blown because they had no idea, these parents, that these children would make up these stories or these ideas of what's going on, make up all their own ideas themselves. So they are unaware of the impact.
And what do those stories revolve around? What are they thinking? What are some of the things these children are thinking?
Well, a lot of them think that they're the cause of the problem, and if they didn't ask for things or they didn't need money, then maybe it would go away. Maybe it was because they'd misbehaved.
So they need the reassurance, which is what came out through street talk quite a bit, that kids need to be reassured that they are not the cause of the problem, that they are still loved.
So do you video the children and then play that back to the parents? Is that the way you do that?
We're not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that, okay,
but
right.
we do have in actions, we work with counsellors who work with children, and they tell us little anecdotes and stories, and they've been able to replay that, and they're very accurate.
Yeah.
And
that's fascinating.
Parents find that incredibly moving. It's probably one of the most moving sessions that we do in that type of program.
So you see the parents kind of sit back at that time and go, oh my goodness, we've been so focused on each other and hating each other, and we've forgotten the children, we didn't realise what they were feeling. And that starts to shift attitudes of the parents at that point?
Yes, I would say it does start to. And some people say, but I'm not fighting. And sometimes what they don't realise is no communication at all can be just as horrendous for a child as fighting.
What do you do if the children actually say something has happened and the children feel that one parent has been terribly wronged? Say, for example, a husband goes off and has an affair or has been hiding an affair for most of the children's lives, and the children actually do not want contact with the father, for example. How do you work with that, Thea?
Well, I think sometimes firstly, obviously, you have to listen to the children, and I think that was one of the things that was brought out, that the children need attention, and they need continuing attention, and they need continuing explanation, and would really need the parent who didn't have the affair to have quite a bit of discussion with the children about what this has meant and what the possibilities from their point of view are for the children afterwards. A child in that position, I mean, if they are very young, I mean, I think up to the age of 13, 14, you can suggest that they have counselling, you can hope that they will change their mind, you can encourage the so-called guilty partner to keep up the contact. You can think of lots of things, you can suggest minimal contact that might mount up to more major contact. There's a lot of innovative things you can do, but sometimes you've got to come to the point where that position is not going to shift, that the child's not going to shift their opinion. More often it's the parent who's not going to shift their opinion rather than the child who's not going to shift their opinion.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Sandra, for popping in.
Great to be here.
Street Talk. And we'll be back with more on The Exchange right after this. Welcome back. We're chatting with Professor Thea Brown and Lifeworks' Wendy Driscoll about parenting after a separation.
Yeah, very interesting conversation. What are some of your tips, Wendy, for helping people straight after a separation? You mentioned a 12-month window. Is that a critical window, the first 12 months?
I think it's very important, those first 12 months, yes. And I often say to people, reach out for help. So often parents are so devastated, but there's a huge amount of help out there. And it can be helpful in different ways. It can be helpful in terms of helping them settle their emotions, finding out what resources are available, and it can help deal with fear. What's going to happen in the future? Are my children going to be harmed? Are we going to be all right?
Right.
And what about when, I'm just kind of thinking about something that I'm aware of, a situation I'm aware of at the moment, where the husband had an affair, the marriage is broken down, and the wife has been obviously very hurt by what has taken place, but now her entire conversation is geared around this, and all of her friends are they've said to her, start talking about other things, we're getting fed up listening to this, etc. And so because she's stuck on this as an issue, it's now driving her support network away. What would you suggest in that regard, Thea?
Well, she's obviously extremely hurt.
She is, yes.
And I would be trying to say to her, look, I can see that you're very, very hurt, but I can also see that things are not moving forward for you. And so what about thinking about going to get some help? And I would go so far as to say what agencies I thought could possibly help, because you know that for her, this means the more she says it, the more she's going to stay stuck.
And she's
just talking about it doesn't get her.
She's experiencing grief and loss,
yes.
whereas he's experiencing a whole new life.
Exactly.
Yep.
So they're in two entirely different situations, but the children are right in the midst of it. I think that's what you're saying.
Again, yes, totally. What about when someone else is on the scene? And, you know, Christy brought this up a little earlier in the program, where then, you know, new partners arrive on the scene and all of that, and you don't always have control over what your children are going to be taught or what they're hearing or experiencing. What's the best thing to do there? Wendy, what would you say?
I think it's helpful if the parents can communicate about it, and I think if the biological parents can do most of the disciplining, that's what the Step Family Association and research has shown is most helpful. That way the children get consistent discipline from their own parents, and any other figures are uncles or aunties or just other mentors maybe, but they don't have active involvement in the child's discipline. That can be very helpful.
And again, that could be part of the business arrangement, if you like, all those things written down and made very, very clear.
Another thing people find helpful is what happens in your own home happens in your own home, but you have to realise when they go to the other parent's home, they are the other parent and they are looking after the children, and
they might need help to realise that they've got to let that go.
And they just do it differently.
So as a society, we seem to be time poor. What small things can be done to make a big impact as we finish up? Thea?
A big impact for the children or the parents?
Yeah, for the children in the midst of a separation.
Spending some of that time that you don't feel you have with the children and asking them how they feel about the situation, and trying to reassure them, and if necessary suggesting that you go for help, I go for help, we all go for help.
Yep.
Yes, there's great venues for that. Family relationship centres who do adult counselling, they do adult groups, and they do children's groups as well, and it's a wonderful, fun way for children to explore their feelings and to let things out and get things back to normal.
And is it fair to say that all of the time spent with the children really doesn't need to be about talking about the issue, because there's so many other things in life? Moving on and maybe developing new ways of doing things with your family is a good way to bring hope?
I think that's terrific. Creating a new family, if it's a new house, well, you can paint the bedroom.
That's a great idea.
You can choose what you're going to do with it. It's something new, it's something fresh, we have an opportunity. So even if our family looks different, it's still a family and it's still special.
Yeah. So we're moving on, aren't we, and beyond it, getting over it, over the process of time. And the take home that I get from all of this is that there are so many resources and helps available for people who are facing this sort of a situation in life. So Thea and Wendy, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for watching. Please go to our website. You'll find a fact sheet with a lot of the detail on that we've talked about today. Hope you can join us next time.
Bye for now.